Welcome back. Yeah, left you on a little bit of a cliffhanger. As I mentioned, Chain of Daisies is the horse that won the last race on the card at Sandown, but it wasn't necessarily the horses in behind that Value Rater is going to be tipping up going forward. However, this is his almost the review, the best piece of form that we can take going forward. Why?
Yeah, not necessarily the best bit of form. The reason I want to talk about the winner, Chain of Daisies, very well placed by a very shrewd Henry Candy. I mean, that yard, when they have a gamble, they don't leave behind. This was seriously backed. I think it was well placed in this race. I don't think there was a lot in behind, I must admit, so I'm not saying to anyone to go and put this in your horse tracker, because I think the handicapper will have his say. But what interests me is Chain of Daisies on his run before was in a race at Goodwood where he won. Now, he's franked this form on Saturday. They've had a gamble. They still know they've got a well-handicapped horse. I went rooting back through that Goodwood race to see what was in behind there. Banditry was the second horse.
Of Michael Bell.
Of Michael Bell in that horse. Now, this horse has got a mark of 77. Bearing in mind that Chain of Daisies, I've got running to a mark of 96 at the weekend. I watched that race back at Goodwood. It was the last one actually off the bridle. Travelled well into the race and, of course, just couldn't get the jockey's body language suggested that he thought he was going to pick Chain of Daisies up, but Chain of Daisies obviously just kept on galloping to the line. But no wonder, when you look at the result on Saturday, it was probably an impossibility. That Banditry is a seriously well handicapped horse. He's got an entry this Friday at Chester over the same distance, and he could be very, very interesting.
Well, it's certainly going to keep an eye on that Chester race, but the one point to make, and you know, that for the viewers at home as well, if they really want to be sure about backing Banditry going forward, then they've got to be sure about the performance of Chain of Daisies.
Yeah.
Maidall maybe got it a bit easy from the front end.
You say that, but the race at Goodwood, it fell apart quickly, and I don't mean in the respect of, you know, things fell in a hole. I mean that if you look back to the third horse in that race, there was a nice gap back. So what that suggested, if you looked at it straight away, you would say, well, the first is beaten, the second a couple of lengths, and there's a couple of lengths back to the third, which normally indicate that they're well handicapped. So I think it's interesting that gap back to the third. Wasn't interesting at the time, but now after this result, knowing that Mr. Candy had the money down, or not Mr. Candy, should I say, or whoever had the money down, no. Banditry, if it's not Friday, put him in your horse tracker and follow him to the end of the season, and I guarantee you he'll win. He's really well handicapped.
Fingers crossed for a run from Banditry on Friday then at Chester, as that really is Value Rater's class act, or at least one of the class acts that we've got on the card here this evening. We are going to be talking all things Falmouth Stakes, which takes place on Friday at the Newmarket. July meeting, of course, starts on Thursday. On the Friday, it's the Falmouth. On the Saturday, it's the July Cup. I've got one up my sleeve to give you for that as well, weather dependent. But before we talk about the races to come in the future, it's worth mentioning something that happened at the weekend. Something called the Coral Eclipse, which is won by the one and only Golden Horn. Now, he's joined in the bracket, not only on your ratings, but now on the BHA ratings released today. They put him up 131. You've got him 133. They've opened the brackets up around Frankel, and they've put him in there. First 3-year-old since Frankel to be rated 130 plus. Is he that good?
Yeah, I think he is. Last week we spoke in depth, and I was saying, take him on at a short price, and I have no embarrassment here today to say that, because if the race happened again, then I'd probably say the same thing at the prices. I do believe that this race still was a lot of horses who require a mile and a half running a mile and a quarter. I think this performance is really good. I mean, just to put the official mark there you can see on your screens, Golden Horn with the OR, that was the official handicap mark going into the race. Now that's been adjusted by the official handicapper from 126 to 130 now, so there's been £4 improvement.
So they've put him up as a £5 improver, and you've seen it. Well, I actually think it's better than that. He's improved in your eyes £7.
No, £3 for me, because if you remember,
you previously had him on the 130 anyway.
I previously had him on the 130 after the Derby.
Step ahead of the game, Mr. Value Rater.
Well, this is exactly what Value Rater is all about, and this isn't me clutching numbers from the air and having a good old guess, because it's uncanny how many times it turn out right. What I'm doing when I assess form is I'm saying the horse predict the horse's future, and it will be this. Now, the handicapper can't be taken. You can't suggest like me. There's £20 in front of the handicapper, because probably he'd have, he'd probably have a hitman after him from owners, and wonder what they've done. So he has to leave Ewen, and I'm seeing it how it is. I do think Golden Horn has improved the £3. Now, where I've got that £3 improvement from is a line through Western Him, who I've very much seen is the common denominator, if you like, because I believe Western Him has run the same race as he did before at Ascot, which is I raced in 119. Now, last time at Ascot, the Grey Gatsby they both took each other on. If you remember, the Grey Gatsby got himself in a little bit of trouble. Now, on the time before at Ascot, Western Him was 2 3/4 lengths behind the Grey Gatsby. This time he's 4.5 lengths behind. So there you are. There's a 1.25 improvement, which would explain the trouble in running the Grey Gatsby had, and that's what he's cost him. Golden Horn himself, and I'm applying that mark of 119, and then you add on, and he's been beaten 8 lengths over the 1.25 miles. That's where I get my rating of 133, which is an improvement for 130. The Grey Gatsby, an improvement from Ascot. Obviously had that little bit of trouble. I've moved him from 124 now to 127. Cougar Mountain. This is the horse that obviously I advised last week at value. Very disappointing. Now, this performance for me was £6 beneath what I had him running to at Ascot. Now, there's either two things. Either you've got to be very concerned about the Ascot form, or more to the point, I believe, it was a combination of the horse not facing the blinkers. He looked half asleep in the paddock beforehand. And just in the early stages of the race, when I watched it back a few more times, is that he just wasn't grabbing the bridle. And Ryan was niggle for the first furlong. And then all of a sudden, it was just like he was half asleep. And I see Aidan's come out and said that they thought he didn't stay. I'm not going to argue against Aidan O'Brien. I'm not so sure that's just the case. I think this all stays.
I mean, I wasn't going to bring this one up, value rated, because I wanted to save you the blushes, really. But this is the one that you put up, not put up, because I mean, you did suggest that Golden Horn will probably go on and win the race. But if anything, you said will come out and improve, it'll be Cougar Mountain, because you thought it may like the step up in trip, because it was by Fastnet Rock, who obviously qualify the Oaks winner, etc., etc. There are a few lines to go on. Aidan O'Brien said that he didn't get the trip at all, and they probably won't take on that plan again. However, if they do take on that plan again, you're not going to oppose it. You just don't think it was up to the game.
It wasn't up to the game. Listen, I wouldn't be rushing.
It did look a bit sleepy in the paddock, I'll give you that.
Yeah, and blinkers are meant to sharpen him out. When I seen that, I thought, blimey, you're meant to sharpen him up, and he looked even more asleep than usual. I think he might be just a tricky customer, and he's not one I would be investing in again. I do think, though, that, I mean, you only have to look at his breeding lines. All his breeding lines, Fastnet Rock, have produced an Oaks winner. Diamonds and Rubies they all stay, so I don't quite buy into the theory of it didn't stay the 1.25 miles. I've got a feeling that perhaps Ryan was doing a bit more work. Sorry, Joseph was riding it, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Joseph was doing a little bit more work than Cougar Mountain in the closing stages. But let's just kind of summarise it, if I can, this race. Now, Golden Horn and the Grey Gatsby, let's not forget the 3-year-old allowances Golden Horn was getting. But let's not forget, this is the first Derby winner to follow up in the Coral Eclipse since See the Stars. So what that goes to prove is it's not an easy thing to do for these 3-year-olds receiving weight to still come and do this. I think, if we compare anything to Frankel, you're always going to be disappointed. Take him out of your mind, Frankel. This Golden Horn, without a doubt, is an all-time great. If my wish was for him to run in a Ledger, because I've said it before, and I do think he would win a St. Ledger Golden Horn.
No market on it. He's not going there. Golden Horn, though, taking on the bigger boys, and he showed that, as you said, can be difficult, even though you're getting the weight allowance, can be difficult to go out there and put your nose in front against your elders. He's done it against the Grey Gatsby. Now he probably will look to do it again in the King George, against Telescope, against Eagle Top, against these horses here. Can he do it again? You would have thought so.
On this rating, those other horses, he'd have for me half a stone in hand of them. I mean,
the Great Gatsby's the best mile 2 mile and a half horse around in behind, isn't he?
Absolutely, he would be if he was going off 4 to 9 on Saturday on the evidence we've known. What price will he be in the King George? Because if he goes off 4 to 9, you could argue he's tremendous value. He should be a lot. He should be a lot shorter. I'd never advise anyone to back short prices. In fact, I wouldn't. I don't bet odds on about getting up in the morning, not alone on a horse race. But you don't have to. It's not all about punting, is it? You can sit back and just admire a good horse without having the stress of having your 90,000 Tom on to win 40.
Yeah, and unfortunately, because at one point that I was going to bring up, but quite rightly corrected, it's just not going to happen. Of course, Golden Horn, the news from the owner breeder, Mr. Oppenheimer, is that, of course, Golden Horn, sadly, like many of these top 3-year-old horses, will be retired at the end of a 3-year-old career to go on to the stallion prospects. Therefore, Golden Horn obviously won't reoppose as an elder against the elders and won't be off level weights, but that would have been a great thing to see. Of course, a filly that won it with receiving weight was Tagruda, the King George last year, and the fillies are the talk of the town now for Friday's Falmouth Stakes. This is the one where the younger fillies get to take on the elders. Again, like the colts did in the Eclipse, the fillies are in here again for the Falmouth. Do we start at the top of the market with Lucida, and is she a valued favourite?
No, I don't. I don't like it. People are going to start thinking that I just take on any old favourite, and a bit like Barry Dennis. But it's honestly not. Best price 3 to 1. I think this is a very good Group 1, really high in quality. And it's a lot deeper than 3 to 1. But my main trouble with Lucida, with the run last time at Ascot in Group 1 company, the Carnation Stakes, came right from the back of the field. It looked very awkward, was hanging in behind, didn't look to me like the horse wanted to go through with it. And if you remember when the horse got beat by Legatissimo in the Guineas, I mean, she should have won that. I mean, Legatissimo was on the back foot, stays 1.25 miles. She went a few lengths clear. I think she was curling up, and I got a feeling that even though she's only having her 8th start, of which it must be said that she's won twice and been placed 4 times, I've got a little squiggle next to her, and I'm not fully trusting of her, and certainly at 3 to 1, she's one to take on.
One to take on as well, I believe, is Integral. I mean, I agree with you here, as we discussed before, but Integral, we're not sure. There's some doubt whether she'll reappear this quickly for the Falmouth. Of course, won it last year, so no doubt has that form in the book. Yes, I can win a Falmouth Stakes, but the fact that she was behind Amazing Maria, but is still a flip-flop in the price, you couldn't be backing Integral.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think before we came on, best price around the 11 to 2 mark. I mean, how can they price it up 11 to 2? For me, it should be 20 to 1 at least. It was 5th last time in the Group 1. We've already highlighted that the strength of the Lockinge form now isn't all of that. I just don't get where they get 11 to 2. Yes, she's got the class. She's a Group 1 winner. She's done it all before. But come on, I mean, she's got. You can't keep on. You've got to forgive her too many runs before you can get to 11 to 2, don't you?
Yeah. I suppose you can't just keep going stout and more. This all looks in place because simply on this occasion it doesn't. I think that the doubt remains whether she will go there. Without getting on to the Group 2 Duke of Cambridge Stakes heroine Amazing Maria, I know that's one we want to talk about, but let's just to jump back up the ladder in the market to Avenir Certain, the French filly. How much do we know about this one? I mean, of course, she disappointed on her seasonal reappearance, didn't she?
Yeah, she's again, she's got the class. She is a Group 1 winner. I think she could be very competitive. Last time was beaten by Flintry over in France. When you start going through some of that form, there's a few collateral form lines. You think, oh, hang on a minute, you shouldn't. I can't fully dismiss her, but around the 5 to 1 that she is, it's a simple number cases. This race is a lot deeper than that, and I think she should be. I think she should be around the 16 to 1 mark. That was my take on the form. Her form previous to that, she won a Group 2 in France at the back end of last year, but it must be said was on very soft ground, and this is going to be very, very different conditions, and I'd be very concerned about the ground for her.
Yeah, you'd be concerned about the ground, of course. I think she won the French 1,000 Guineas and the French Oaks on very testing ground. has since disappointed, and for a horse coming over from France with those question marks there, we're not so keen on that one, are we, Value Rater? But the one I suppose that there has to be some potential in her performing well again is Amazing Maria. As I said, I think that Amazing Maria, she actually does want or will improve for a little bit of cut in the ground as well, and a few showers forecast up at Newmarket could breed a bit more improvement for Amazing Maria ahead of the Falmouth.
Yeah, what I will say, I probably should have said at the start of the piece, was that I do think there's going to be a lot of pace in the race. You know, when I went through, I thought there's pace there, there's pace there, there's pace there, which I think is going to help her. This is another filly by Master Craftsman, who we've already established, you know, they stay 1.25 miles very well. Now, I can't understand for the life of me why she's 12 to 1 in the race when Rosina, who she's already beat 2 lengths at Royal Ascot fair and square, is around the same price. And Integral was obviously back in 5th. Yes, I don't think Integral ran a race, but she's still back there. And this is 11 to 2. Integral, Amazing Maria 12 to 1. I must admit, she took me by surprise in that race at Ascot, and if you allow media sometimes or comments in the Racing Post to lead you, they were trying to make out that there was a bit of a headwind and that Rosina was on the outside and got caught, hit the front 2 seam, and of course Amazing Maria kind of picked up the pieces, if you like, because she was held up. Now, I've watched that race back a few times, and I think that's insulting to Amazing Maria. I thought she stayed the trip out really well. I mean, that performance there, I rated 122. All right, this is a Group 1, it is a step up in class, but what you must say is she has beaten a Group 1 animal in Rosina. So that tells me that she must have the class here, and she's definitely my selection for this race. I think she's tremendous value. I must admit, I do think there's been a little bit improvement with her. I don't think a great deal. I mean, on a previous effort, at the Curragh, I don't think that form's too bad, even the bits and pieces that haven't worked out, which I think perhaps is more circumstantial. But she did surprise me on the day, but when I went rooting back through her form, let's not forget she carried top weight on the 9th of May at Ascot. Tempress won that race, which was a handicap. Obviously, Frank the form at Royal Ascot, and Solar Magic for John Gosden, who has been very disappointing, but back then she was in very good form. So I don't know, this Amazing Maria, she definitely is the value for me in the selection at 12 to 1.
Yeah, I mean, Temptress disappointed me today at Pontefract, but I think that was probably due to what I saw as a Queen Katrine taking a real slow pace up front. It wasn't a very heavily run race at all, which I think Amazing Maria will need in the Falmouth. A strong pace in front.
Should get that.
Because, there's no doubt this horse was, without repeating myself week on week, this horse was lined up for 1,000 guineas, and this horse was lined up for an Epsom Oaks.
Yeah.
That's how highly Ed Dunlop and I believe the owner, Sir Robert Ogden, had thought of her. Now, there was obviously a problem in the Dunlop yard, and it's gone to Omara, and I wish them all the best with it, really. Whether I'll be backing her again over the mile, I'm not so sure. I'm going to look to the likes of Euro Charlene. Let's talk about Euro Charlene, who was 4th behind Solo in Dubai in March. Now, anything that comes behind Solo is probably worth looking at.
Absolutely. Now, this was one I did have a good pause on last night when I was looking at the race. Yeah, I take your point. It was a mile 1 furlong over in Maydown. When I watched that race back, what's put me off really is, yes, Solo we've seen is a natural miler, and the Grey Gatsby we've obviously seen that's a 1.25 miles, 1.5 miles. I thought the horse looked outpaced her on that mile 1, and previous to before that over in America at Arlington, that was almost 1 mile 2 furlongs when finishing really strongly. I would be completely with you if it was 1.25 miles. I'm concerned, even though there's going to be a fast pace, I do think she's very vulnerable. I can see her staying on, running into a place, but I must admit I couldn't put anyone off around the 12 to 1 mark, and she's probably the one that I would like to highlight and say, if it's not this week, follow her in when she steps up in trip.
Yeah, I mean, of course, the interesting story in the week with Marco Botti's runner Euro Charlene was that they've had her on some kind of stall, leaving the stalls preparation, some kind of special training. Because I mean, she lined up for the Duke of Cambridge with the likes of Rosina, and obviously didn't jump out of the stalls. So they've had some kind of special stall handlers in it. Did you ever factor anything like that in quirky horses? Or
do you know what? Well, yeah, quirky horses. I mean, there's nothing like a paddock to put you off.
Right.
And I've stopped doing it. I remember I went to Newbury back in the winter, and of course I used to go paddock watching most days. And of course, where I've been busy doing various other things, I'm more at kind of home. And I think you got a great guide on the TV more than you ever did to go racing. But the amount of times I've been racing and see one sweating in the paddock and think, well, no, not going to have any of that. Let's go back to the bar, and it goes and wins.
Not least yourself.
Yeah, and then absolutely, and then some smart aleck comes up to you afterwards just to make you feel better and say, "Oh, that horse always sweats."
Always sweats. Yeah. That was
you say
funny.
absolutely lovely. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I mean they were sweating up in the paddock at Sandown. Understandably, I think it was 29 degrees or something. I mean, I would have had an umbrella up. But
They say some horses, if you didn't see him sweat, you'd worry, and the vice versa. If a horse started sweating that usually doesn't sweat, but I try and keep everything to form analysis. I keep a very level staking plan on things that I'm doing. I only invest in a certain grade of animal where they are more nurtured, if you like, into a performance. So I rather put that trust in the trainer's hands. I think the more quirky horses that we see in racing, perhaps a lower grade race, and that's probably the more beneficial of going racing probably in the week.
Okay, a couple more to mention. We have got a little bit of time to spend on this race. So we've talked about Fintry. She's failed to break her Group 1 duck. Arguably had the chances. Now another one who's yet to break the Group 1 duck and coming into the Falmouth is the other French filly, Bawina. Where do we place her? Do we know enough about her to come up here with a good set of equation, a good bit of form line to come into this?
I'm not sure she deserves to be around the 8-1 mark that I've seen her put in. Obviously, a Group 2 winner. The major problem for her will be ground. She's been winning on, sort of say, soft, heavy ground. Must be said at Newmarket as we record this on a Tuesday night. At the moment, it's good to firm. I believe Wednesday they've got some rain coming. It's very difficult to know how much. You couldn't imagine the ground going any worse than good ground, but I still suspect it's probably on the quick side. Beat spoiled the fun last time, and of course the back end of last year in a Group 1 company was behind Charmed Spirit, Tornado and Night of Thunder. Again, I could see her being competitive, but for me she should be double the price. This is the thing that got me with this market, is it just looks should be the other way around. I find it remarkable how some of these fillies have been priced in this race, really.
And to go back to Euro Charlene and the whole stall problem, but that aside, when we're talking about the trip, backing her over the mile or the 1 mile too, but I mean, Marto Bossi's come out and said, Euro Charlene's pleasing me at home. The Kipco Falmouth Stakes, stiff mile is her ideal trip, and fast ground should not be a problem. I mean, this is why I'm on side here, not to shout your call down.
No, I mean, absolutely. I mean, she's won on very, very fast ground over in America. There's no doubt about that. My concern is the trip with her. Her run in Arlington last year, for me, was her best performance. To be honest, that's the highest mark I've got a filly in here of 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. So I couldn't put you off on there. But it must be said that this race is going to be over a furlong and a half shorter, and I've just got a feeling, Tom, that you might just be running on for a bit of place money, but you won't be in the winners' enclosure.
Okie doke. We'll just run back through that in a minute as we thought, but if there's one thing that you could help us with at home, that would be giving us the form lines and the potentials of the Valdemar Hickster-trained Ajax Zana. We don't know anything about this one, do we? The German filly.
No.
The German filly that comes into the race. She won very nicely at Cologne last time out. I know just about that much. And won last year's German 1,000 guineas. But there's got to be question marks all over the place with one like this. And I think the German Derby at the weekend really thrown loads of horses at the mix, which we just don't know anything about. So if you do know anything at home, I know German Racing Reviews, a pretty prominent Twitter account over there in Deutschland for their racing. So German Racing Review, get in touch if you've got some light to shed on the Hicks-trained Ajax Zana. Would be interesting, as do any of you at home, should you know anything about the German trained filly. But
sorry to interrupt. The one I did want to mention, and this isn't for saying back her on Friday. I mean, you might want to have something on her. Lady Dutch, another one of Marco Botti's Martin Harley race. Now, this horse has been very disappointing the last the last start was certainly very disappointing in the Curragh. She's obviously been let off of things since the 23rd of May, but her run in Group 2 level behind Braggin and Clio, all right, that form won't be enough to win this, but she was very impressive on the all-weather before that, meeting this Solar Magic, which we were talking about with that good form with Temperance.
Really, we're still expecting to do something, I suppose. Solar Magic, keeping an eye on her still?
Ooh, she'd have to do it. She's disappointed me twice now. But I guess the point I'm making was at the time of this form, she wasn't. You know, she was going okay at that time. And this Lady Dutch beat her really easy as Rail Run Kempton. And Lady Dutch before that at the mile beat a Baltic Knight 2 1/4 lengths. A form also that's worked out. You wouldn't do any worse than throwing a saver on her at 60-61. But more to the point, maybe just have a good eye on her and leave her alone for this Friday. She might just be having a nice little introduction, perhaps back into things, and maybe aim for something later in the season. But if Mr. Botti can get her back to some of that form, what she was showing early season at Kempton, well, blimey, she'd be in the mix here, I feel.
And Marco Botti, as we said with Euro Charlene, may well be double-handed. Now, the last time that I put up Amazing Maria in a tipping circle, it was for the Nassau Stakes at Glorious Goodwood last year. Really fancied her on the day, ended up being pulled out because, yeah, you guessed it, firm ground. Of course, that Nassau Stakes, and she's come back to win on the firm ground. That's the one that you're going to be putting up ahead of the Falmouth, is it?
Absolutely. Amazing Maria. I can't understand why she's the price she is. I put her in at 5-1, and the fact that you've got her in 12-1, she's the second best rated on here.
12-1 at the moment, a double-figure price.
Absolutely, just unbelievable. I mean, I think that, again, she's probably looking like the horse that say, well, it's a bit of a fluke, everything's fell apart, Integra hasn't run its win. I mean, Rosanna, we haven't really talked much about. Of course, Amazing Maria beat her. There is a case to be made that she hit the front too soon.
And the wind issues.
And the wind issues. I really do think they're overplayed, these wind issues. I pay little attention, and they say, oh, it was in a headwind and that, because you obviously there are wind issues. They're not making it up. But what I'm saying is later on in the season, when you look through the form, it hasn't made any difference at all. You know, and I just think it's another angle to make a little excuse with. But Rosina, you could argue around the 12-1 mark. She is a Group 1 filly on a game. You know, that was her best performance we've seen for a little while, wasn't it, last time at Ascot, having disappointed prior to that. But no, Amazing Maria for me in the Falmouth. I think at 12-1, I think it's a real good race, and I think it's form that certainly will work out really well.
Okay, well, on that point, it seems apt to probably just wrap the end of this up with what could be a real Friday profitable tipping section. In being on Friday, you can back Amazing Maria in the Falmouth. But not only that, just to go back to the one which we mentioned earlier, Banditry at Chester.
Absolutely.
Banditry at Chester on the Friday as well. Now that's it really, that's the whole review done of last weekend's racing, including the Coral Eclipse, and us all looking forward to seeing Golden Horn again, who Value Rater says, yes, he is well and truly franked up there in the 130 plus bracket. One race that we haven't mentioned is, of course, the July Cup. You must be thinking, well, they haven't mentioned it. Well, Value Rater, of course, tipping up the Falmouth. I'm going to give you a couple very quickly for the July. If the ground gets a bit of give-in, if the clouds break, then G-Force is the one to be on. 5 furlongs up to the 6 with a bit of cut in the ground. I've heard a few irks and ers on the side of me here.
Still hurting from the last time.
Still hurting from the last time. Yeah, well, I think G-Force has just about got home in the King's Stand now as well. A bit late coming home, but no, if the rain doesn't come, very fast and furious filly to keep an eye on. Anthem Alexander, trained by no less than Eddie Lyon, of course, has Soul Power in the race, but Soul Power was certainly not a 6 furlong horse. So keep on side of Anthem Alexander if the ground is good. Keep on the side of G-Force if the ground is soft. And on Friday, Value Raters class acts are Amazing Maria, currently can be backed at around the 12-1 mark. And also on the Friday, on the Chester card, if Michael Bell's Banditry goes there, have a look out for him. And we'll be seeing you next week.